3,500 years before the first smartphone, before television, before any sort of modern entertainment existed, one person faced off against another and made a calculated move on a wooden board. They were attempting to win, and the person opposite was trying to make sure they didn't. The game was real, the tension was real, and the psychology that drove them both was exactly the same psychology that drove you right now. When we think about ancient humans, we think of people doing mostly just trying to survive, finding food, avoiding predators, building shelter. It almost seems strange that they had time to play, as if play was something that civilization invented later as a luxury. But the archaeological record tells a different story. Ancient humans didn't just play games. They played with determination. And when you find out what these games were really doing behind the scenes, you'll never look at any game the same way again. Here's the thing about games that nobody discusses. Every game that's ever been made has rules written by somebody else, and those rules always reflect the values, priorities, and agenda of those who made them. This is no coincidence, and that is the point. When archaeologists study ancient games, they do not only find entertainment, they discover mirrors. A game tells you what a society valued, what a society feared, what kind of person they were trying to make. The games were never separate from culture. They were one of the main ways culture was passed down from one generation to the next, without anyone having to make a speech about it. They used games as modern militaries use simulations to build particular kinds of minds, particular reflexes, people who would act in predictable ways when it counted most. The Royal Game of Ur is one of the oldest board games ever discovered, dating back over 4,500 years. Archaeologists first found it and thought it was a primitive pastime. Then they found the clay tablet that explained the rules, and the picture changed totally. The game was born out of the idea of fate. The board was the ancient Mesopotamian idea of life and death. Your moves were determined by cast-bone dice. You weren't playing any game. You were practicing your relationship with uncontrollable forces. The psychological interest is who was playing it. The evidence suggests it was a popular practice amongst priests and rulers who relied on convincing others of the reality of fate and of their special relationship with fate for all their authority. A game that mimics fate starts to not look like entertainment and starts to look like a very deliberate message. Physical competition in ancient Greece was never just about finding out who was fastest or strongest. It was entertainment with a public rating system built in. Glory was not the only benefit of winning the Olympics. It brought land and political influence and social standing that could change your family's position for generations. But the history books don't tell you this. The athletes who took part were nearly all from affluent families who could support years of dedicated training and professional coaching. The games looked open but were designed in such a way as to make it almost impossible to succeed from the ground up, and the people watching understood this on some level. The games weren't just entertainment, it was a reminder of the natural order, of who was supposed to be on top and who was supposed to cheer from the sidelines. Most of us think the Roman gladiator games were all about violence. The violence was real and brutal, but what the arena was really doing for the people running Rome was much more calculated. It was about attention, and attention is the oldest form of control there is. These games were given by the Roman government for nothing. Free admission, free show, and often free food. Instead, it gave hundreds of thousands of restless, frustrated citizens something to focus on other than the government itself. Bread and circuses. Keep folks fed and entertained and no one cares. You can do just about anything with real power while no one is looking. The arena also granted an illusion of power to the audience, who could decide whether a defeated combatant lived or died. That was all fiction. The emperor always had the last word. But the psychological effect on the crowd was real. People who feel powerful don't usually ask where that power actually comes from. In almost all of the games children played in ancient civilizations, the games were devised by adults, and nearly all of them taught a particular thing that the adult world wanted the next generation to believe without question. In ancient Rome, children played games about military formation. Games of balance and catch in Egypt taught the physical discipline necessary for labor and service. In ancient China, boys as young as 5 were introduced to competitive archery. It was sold as a fun activity, but was actually based on the values of precision, patience, and respect for hierarchy. None of these children knew what was happening to them. That was the idea. You can't put a value system in a person who's fighting you, but you can put it in a child who's laughing and having a good time. The delivery system was play. The ideology was the substance, and that method has never ceased to be used. Take a moment to look at the bigger picture. Games followed the same basic pattern from every ancient civilization, from millennia and dozens of entirely different cultures. They were never just for fun. They were about teaching people how to think, how to compete, how to feel satisfied within a system designed to serve someone else's interests. The royal game of Ur taught men to resign themselves to their fate in a world governed by those who professed to know it. The Greek Olympics celebrated a subtly rigged meritocracy. The Roman arena made people feel powerful, but the real power was exercised somewhere they couldn't see. And children's games instilled the values of the next generation before those children had the language to push back. All games are played by rules invented by somebody else. Every game has outcomes that someone else designed, and every game makes you feel your choices matter while working within limits you never signed up for and probably never noticed. The question is not whether you're playing games right now. The question is, have you ever stopped to ask yourself who made the rules and what they hoped you would never find out? Some of those rules are centuries old, some were written a lot more recently, and some are running in places you wouldn't think of looking.